varieties. We farm approximately 400 acres at any given time, have over 50 varieties of flowers growing on our farm. Unlike other farms, you have to picture our farm sort of like a patchwork quilt because we just don't have one product. We have several products. So you might have 2 acres of tulips next to 10 acres of lilies next to 20 acres of myrtle. So there's all kinds of things taking place. And each of those squares is constantly changing in terms of the crops, cultivating times, diseases, pests, irrigation needs, and the market demands. We're very concerned by EPA's arbitrary cuts of our allocations with no real burden of evidence showing a feasible or technical alternative exists for certain crops. We're also concerned about situations that are emerging on our farms requiring emergency cleanup applications of methyl bromide. As a grower, we have a limited number of tools in our toolbox, and when you take a tool away from us, it puts pressure on the remaining tools. And when you leave us with only weak tools, we become as weak as the tools are. Soon, if these tools become useless, we have to walk away. And sadly, many growers are starting to walk away from growing their crops. Please understand, we are using alternatives whenever possible, and in some instances, they work for a short time, but then issues start to pop up. A good example is nutgrass. We've been using alternatives such as telone, chloropicrin, and vapam, and while they did a decent job for a little while of knocking down the nutgrass, it never eliminated it. And after a few years, these pop back up and take over our crop. We then find ourselves applying excessive amounts of these so-called alternatives. So not only are we compounding the use of alternative chemicals, we're also finding now, later on, that there's a detrimental effect to our crops, which forces us to prematurely disc under our flowers, and we're disking under our investment as well. A periodic application of methyl bromide is more effective, and we believe it is safer. We also have difficulty in the cut flower industry because we can't fit our growing practices into one neat formula due to this ever-changing patchwork quilt that I described earlier. In these squares, we have perennials, annuals, bulb crops, seed crops, and shrubs. Our crops at Mellano Co can have a planting value of $60,000 an acre, and some of these perennial crops will be in the ground from anywhere from 5 to 25 years. We can't afford to put plants like this that are this expensive into dirty soil. We also can't predict when in that 5 to 25 years we'll be replanting this crop based on issues that pop up. So periodic applications, it's difficult for us to fit into an application process because it's not every year. It might be in 5 years, it might be in 8 years. The cut flower industry has converted many crops over to alternatives, but in a few instances, alternatives do not exist. This year, the cut flower industry submitted a similar application to EPA as in the previous few years. However, EPA determined we had no need and submitted nothing to the international body. We understand EPA assumed methyl iodide would be a drop-in replacement for our entire industry, despite the fact that we provided scientific information showing that methyl iodide was not useful to California growers. We can't afford for EPA to make assumptions in our dynamic industry about our growing practices without understanding our industry first. Not only is methyl iodide not a replacement in California, the manufacturer withdrew sales of that compound in the US. So now, what does our industry do? The United States agricultural community has complied with the CUE requirements where no alternatives exist, despite the fact that this process is cumbersome, time-consuming, and costly. We're willing to do so because in a few instances, we still need this strong tool in our toolbox. Yet our applications continue to be arbitrarily reduced without any or inadequate scientific explanation. So now we're left with weak tools or with nothing at all. I personally cannot understand why EPA can so easily make these cuts. Every minuscule cut that they make means so much to our survival and so little in the grand scheme to the other parties. Why is our government hurting us? And we are being hurt. In the floral industry, many growers, including my family, is cutting back on our crop mix to a very limited number of varieties to ensure that we have access to the proper growing tools. This means fewer varieties available and certainly nothing new in the marketplace. Thus, other developing countries are taking on these varieties and providing them to the consumer, which begins the decline of our business. People are in pain. Our family farm is in pain, and it is something that Congress can do something about. Please reaffirm the CUE process beyond 2014. Ensure that